Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. My name is Valerie Briggs. I am the Communications Director for ResNet. I'm joined by Matthew Gingrich, who is our Emerging Leadership Council Chair, and we want to welcome you to today's webinar on What's Up with the Emerging Leadership Council. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. As you may have heard when we started, everyone's line is on mute. So we ask that you hold on to your questions. We'll do a Q&A at the end. There is, I believe, a hand raise function on your screen. So if you'd like to ask the question verbally, you can do that when we get to the Q&A portion, or if you just want to type it into the chat feature, we can take a look at those questions and bring those up as well. But again, thank you all for joining us. And we look forward to getting started. And with that, I'm going to kick it to Matt Gingrich to start us off.
Awesome. Thanks, Valerie. And thanks, everybody, for joining and listening today. So why is ResNet looking at an Emerging Leadership Council? Essentially, they've seen what's going on with some other organizations, for example, like the code officials, and they realize it's time to get the next generation involved in a leadership capacity. So the ELC is going to function as a forum where emerging leaders can help shape and guide the future of ResNet. We're going to advise ResNet on how to effectively recruit, mentor, and motivate the organization's emerging leadership. And we're going to develop a set of recommendations on how to effectively nurture the next generation of ResNet. Next slide, please. The responsibilities of the council will include introducing and promoting innovation, providing marketing input and generationally appropriate messaging for those in and outside the industry. We want to promote technological literacy and advise on how to broaden the consumer appeal of ResNet and HERS ratings. The ELC will have a ex officio representation on the ResNet Board of Directors and have designated correspondents with members to participate with the standards development committees. They'll have the opportunities to work with Chris McTaggart on SDC 200, which oversees education, training assessment, and certification standards. Brett Dillon, who's involved with SDC 300, overseeing ResNet's technical standards. John Hensley works on SDC 900, which is the ResNet quality assurance. And Jacob Atala is working on SDC 1100, which is the new water rating index. So lots of potential there, ways to get involved and help out the industry. There'll be other ways to get involved as well. There's an annual function hosted by the Emerging Leadership Council at the ResNet conference. Social media outlets. ResNet is on several social media outlets right now, and it would be very positive if we could get some more, participation in these outlets. A like, a positive comment, something like that could help broaden ResNet's reach and maybe get ResNet out in front of ResNet and HERS out in front of some people who don't even know what we're about. We're also looking at doing some podcasts, and there's opportunity there for participation. We need some content and some speakers for that. We're going to work on some more mobile-friendly content for the website. And we're also looking at kind of branching the website out from basically resnet.us being a consumer and a professional, and a professional website, kind of trying to steer consumers towards the HERS index and keep ResNet for the professionals. And we will be sending out some additional surveys as well, and all participation would be welcome in those. And this is our way to help shape and guide the future of ResNet. There are some limitations. It will be open to any member of ResNet, not just new or young members. It will be open to anybody with a focus on the new generation of leadership. Membership would not imply an endorsement from ResNet. or any member company's products or services. ELC members would have no authority in respect to the operations of ResNet, policy, or budget, and they will have participation with the Standards Development Committee, but would not have direct standards development authority.
Great. Thank you, Matt, for that overview. Again, we're very excited to sort of reboot the Emerging Leadership Council. As we said in the invitation we sent out for today's webinar, we sort of launched this, I believe, at the last Building Performance Conference for ResNet and received some interest, but had a few roadblocks on the way. And so now we're looking to sort of re-engage and reignite that interest and start some programs that folks can get involved in. So with that said, as Matt mentioned, we do have the ex officio representative on the ResNet board, again, a non-voting member that person would be, and then as well as some correspondence member opportunities on the Standard Development Committee that Matthew listed, as well as some of the intent of the committees and the respective chairs. What we're interested in doing also is creating sort of new subcommittees to look at the purpose of the council and sort of divide some of that work into some perhaps subcommittee work that people who have a particular interest in some of that work could volunteer to be involved with. Again, to give the ELC some focus and goals towards meeting their design purpose, as well as some activities we hope to have coming up at the 2018 ResNet Building Performance Conference. So one committee we talked about developing was sort of geared towards schools and the workforce. As many of you know, the building industry, like many trade industries, is already suffering and expected to suffer even greater challenges with labor shortages. You'll see in this picture here, actually, this is from a recent event that ResNet hosted with KB Home in the Orlando area, where we invited students from a local high school to come and talk with raters. Some of those are folks from Top Build down in the Florida area, to talk with raters and to see a live demonstration of the rating process, including things like blower door tests, for instance. And so we thought we could expand upon that idea and perhaps work to develop a plan and resources for others, anyone who's interested, to reach out to the students and sort of the up and coming next generation of industry professionals in their area. The opportunity again to provide sort of a toolkit, if you will, that builders, raters, other folks could use to engage and invite the local high school students. So that's an opportunity that we'd like to sort of pursue with the workforce, the school workforce group. Our other potential subcommittee, as Matt mentioned, was about technology. One of the purposes and sort of priorities of the ELC is to promote that technological literacy. We surveyed rating companies and provider companies a few months ago and asked them about some of the technologies they would be interested in seeing ResNet engaged in, and a podcast came up as an idea that many said they'd like to see us sort of pursue. So this committee could look into what the logistics are of creating some type of frequent podcast, as Matt mentioned, and the content that would be covered during those broadcasts. And again, what are the latest technical resources, materials, what are the latest technologies that are being used in the energy efficiency and rating space, and how can we develop some resources and information to help get the word out about those emerging technologies to those in the rating industry. The third group is sort of a broad-based engagement group, looking to reach and sort of meet the responsibility of the council to increase engagement for the next generation on specific issues and make sure that the messaging is appropriate accordingly. And as Matt mentioned, that can include supporting the ResNet efforts on social media outreach, sort of developing some online social media ambassadors, if you will, that are helpful in helping to like and repost and share our content with your friends and followers as well. And we also envision that the ex officio representatives and the correspondent members for the Standard Development Committee would sort of serve on this engagement subcommittee as well. Another opportunity for this committee could be the scholarship option that we are looking into, again, in line with the purpose and sort of goals of the ELC, into inviting those who are going to be future leaders, not only for ResNet, but for the entire industry, helping bring those folks on board and inviting them perhaps to attend the ResNet Building Conference so they can have some exposure to that as they sort of navigate their way into the industry. And as Matt mentioned, also looking at having this committee help with the development of the survey to send out to the radio community for feedback and ideas on participation, and also, again, ideas for things that they would like to see the council take on. For the ResNet conference, again, it's February 26th, 28th in Orlando, Florida. We hope that those of you on the line have already registered to attend. We are very excited about the event and are in the process now of approving some of the sessions and developing sort of the session tracks for the content. So for those of you that have attended previously, you know it's always a good show and a good chance for you to meet and learn and talk with your peers. From the ELC perspective, we are going to have a session similar to the previous one we did, where we want to invite those in attendance to come and hear about what we're talking with you about today, some of these new ideas and subcommittees that we're developing. Hopefully, some of you on the line, if you decide and express interest to us and participate on some of those committees, we can work with you to sort of flesh out and be able to present at the conference some of the ways you want to get those ideas going. We hope to have just a small sort of event or mixer in the hotel during the conference that will be for people who are interested in learning about the ELC and perhaps even first-timers to the event. And another way to recognize first-timers is we're going to look to see if we can have some badge ribbons that people can affix to their registration badges to indicate that they are a first-time attendee, because often those are folks who are, you know, maybe even new to the industry, and again, an opportunity to welcome them and get them engaged should they be interested in future leadership opportunities with ResNet and within the industry. And again, as we mentioned, the scholarship opportunities to help get some of those folks better engaged in joining us. So with that, you have our contact information here on the slide, and we have created sort of an online interest form that we will use for people to express interest to us about serving on the ELC and which particular subcommittee or activity you'd like to be involved in. You see a link there on the screen. We're going to provide this handout immediately after the webinar, so you'll be able to click on that link and fill out the form accordingly and let us know about your interest. So with that, if anyone has any questions, please feel free, as we mentioned, to type those into the chat box, or you can raise your hand on the screen there, and then we can call on you to ask any questions or share any ideas you might have about other things that you would like to see the ELC engage in. Matt, any other thoughts or comments as the chair of the ELC that you'd like to share as we stop and take a moment to gather some of these questions?
I would just say that it's a great opportunity to get involved and help shape the future of where this organization is going to go. And you know, this is the platform. This is the way to do it. So hopefully we get some good questions and, you know, get some participation and can get this council off the ground.
Sure. We have a question so far from, I believe, Sarah Berger, asking about travel costs. That's a good question, Sarah. As of this juncture, we don't have any sort of separate funds allocated towards travel for ELC. I think Matt and I's sort of assumption was that in terms of activities that we'd be having committee members engage in, we would find opportunities to do those via webinar vehicles like this here, or when we are all together sort of at events like the Building Performance Conference. I think as we flesh out some of the ideas about some of the activities that some of these subcommittees would be interested in doing, if there is a need for some budget to associate with those activities, then as ResNet staff, I'd be responsible for sort of going up the chain and find out if those funds are available. That's a good question. Thank you. Other questions? Again, type into the chat function, or if you want to do the raise hand function, we can call on you to offer those directly. Let's see. We have a question from Bill at TrueTech about who can email about the podcast. If you have an interest in that, Bill, again, you can use that link that we have in this last slide here, or you can also contact me directly via the email you see listed there in order to talk a little bit further about that if you're interested in participating on that committee. Another question we have from Connor Dillon asking about how someone gets a designated member of ResNet. What we're looking at, I think, for the board, and Matt, feel free to chime in on that, is some of the designated memberships on the boards and the standard development committees. Matt, do you have any thoughts on that?
I was just going to say, fill out the interest sheet, and I think we'll get a sense of who wants to go where, who's able to get involved where, and there would be follow-up based on your participation in the interest form.
Yes, absolutely. And I think what we're looking at really is my vision of those designated sort of correspondence members with the board and with the standard development committees is really someone who helps to articulate to the rest of the membership and the rest of the industry what has happened, or what transpired at those meetings. I've heard a lot of feedback from some of the surveys that we've done on communication. Folks need help to sort of put some of these standards and the amendments and some of the changes that those things represent into a little bit more plain language. So it would be great, I think, if we had members helping us to do that, to basically say, what's in it for me? What is this standard or this amendment change, to a standard? What does that mean for me and my business, and what it means as I'm out performing ratings functions? So part of my interest, and I think Matt's as well, is to have people who can help us better articulate those messages.
Exactly.
Another question is about the amount of time anticipated as involvement in the ELC will be, and that's from Ari Rappaport. That's a great question. I think it's sort of something that is still will be sort of worked out as we get a sense of who's interested in what committees and the ideas that come about from those. I don't imagine, 3 to 5 hours a week is I think a reach on the type of activity one would see and participate on some of these committees. But again, it would kind of depend on the activities that the committees decided to take on. Matt, do you have any sort of thoughts on the time commitment we're looking at?
I would think that being involved with the SDCs might be a greater time commitment than some of the other potential areas to work in. I think the SDC would take a lot of time. As far as like podcasts go and things like that, we'd have to look and see what kind of content, what kind of interest we get, and the amount of time involved. I'm thinking 3 to 5 hours a week would be kind of a lot. I'm thinking maybe just for the general group, maybe one conference call a month, as far as updates, and then your individual involvement that would rely on essentially which category you wanted to dive into.
I think that's a very good point. Yes, given the frequency of meetings by the standard development committees and such, someone who was interested in that would have a little bit more activity on their plate probably than some of the other committees. But again, that's where you kind of indicate that interest to us on the link that we'll be sending you, and then kind of take it from there. I envision like any good committee will have some interest from people. We'll have a process to determine if someone wants to be sort of a chair of that committee and sort of keep it on task and focus. And then, like Matt mentioned, probably having of that committee having some kind of monthly sort of check-in as you work on some of the objectives that you decide to pursue. But that's a great question. We have a question about opportunities at local community colleges from Kevin Weir. I think that is exactly kind of the question that I would see the Schools and Workforce Committee sort of looking to tackle. My vision, and again, this is sort of set in stone. This is sort of how Matt and I sort of looked at the goals of the committee and came up with sort of a measurable task that these subcommittees could work on. It could be that, really what we're going to create is sort of a toolkit that any interested builder or rating company could have on hand that helps to explain what ResNet is, what the HERS index is, how someone who is interested in pursuing a career in the building industry would sort of find a path to start working in the rating and energy efficiency space. And if those builders or rating companies have relationships with their local community colleges or the local high schools, then they could use that information to engage with those groups. And then we could possibly also talk about tips and ideas that companies could use to get started reaching out to local schools in their area. So I think those are some of the questions and opportunities that committee would be looking to tackle. So we've got a lot of good questions here. We're excited about that. Hold on, let me just screen through a few more of these. There's a question about linking with local chapters of emerging leaders groups like the USGBC state chapters. This is a comment from Carmel Pratt, that this could be a good avenue to spread the word. Yes, absolutely. And again, those are the kind of the ideas that you all maybe know from your work in the industry that would definitely help us to connect the dots. Who do we need to talk to on a local level to get these messages out? So we appreciate those suggestions. And for those of you on the line who have thoughts and suggestions about some of these committees, even if they're not committees that you are particularly interested in working on, feel free. There is a comment box on the link that you can use to provide any of those suggestions also. We have a question from a David Pedrick about is the ELC an advisory committee or a group that does ResNet social media and other perceived young people things? Matt, could you speak a little bit about the intent of the ELC to reach folks of all ages?
Well, I mean, it is something for all ages. We want to look at the new members, and just because you're a new member, it doesn't mean you're a young person, if you will. It's just about getting newer members engaged and getting them a voice. Does that answer the question?
Absolutely. No, I think that's where we're going. And from my understanding, that when we sort of launched the ELC previously, there might have been some confusion or some sort of focus on how do we engage young people, and that definitely is a group we want to engage. I think the Schools and Workforce sort of subcommittee speaks to that interest, but there are a lot of folks who perhaps are working in different parts of the building industry who now want to look into coming into the energy efficiency rating space, and how can we engage and welcome them. So it really is about anyone who wants to be involved in the industry, by definition being new, if you will, not necessarily about age or level of experience, I think. Another question, Matt, maybe you can help us address, is how it was previously pitched as a development committee to develop future ResNet leaders. Do you still feel like that is some of the intent? Could you speak to that a little bit, Matt?
I do feel like that's the intent. If you go to the conference, you can kind of look around and see that there's some don't know how to say it, aging folks around. And, if we continue at that rate and not bring in some newer folks, the membership is going to drop. And they want to get new people excited about ResNet, get new people involved, and get new people a voice.
Absolutely. And as we mentioned before, this is an issue, problem, concern that isn't necessarily unique to the rating space. I mean, I think all sort of skills trades are looking at these upcoming labor shortages and what to do about them. But it's not just about welcoming and bringing on new people to the industry. It's about those who can potentially also come into the industry and be in that future leadership role. I believe an email just went out earlier today about the nominations process for the ResNet board, for instance. So thinking, in a future sense, who are the next potential leaders and folks who would be interested in pursuing some of those board positions. And so you have to kind of think about in advance of that, how are we going to groom those folks, if you will, to be in a position to do that in the future. Other questions? We had a few that we were able to go through, I think, and thank you all so much for them. They're good questions and things that we will want to flesh through with as a large committee and also via the subcommittees. But we definitely appreciate the feedback, and it's what's going to help us keep moving forward. So as I mentioned, say again?
I said, is that it for questions?
I think so far. I want to, we got a little bit of time because we ended pretty early on the 5. And it doesn't have to be just questions as well. Again, like some of the comments that we got, if you have suggestions or ideas, or again, even if it's not a committee that you personally want to work on, but you have an idea about some of the resources or things that committee could look into, feel free to share that with us now or via the interest form. It's not just about sort of questions, it's also about sort of content and ideas. Are there other areas that you envision that the ELC should pursue? Then we welcome that interest as well. And just in terms of next steps, as Matt mentioned, and maybe you want to expound a little bit more, Matt, about when we get sort of these entries from these interest forms and what we envision sort of doing next with Matt.
I lost contact. Could you repeat that?
Oh, sure. I was saying if you want to sort of talk about our kind of next steps with those who expressed interest today via the form, so how we envision reaching out to those folks and going to sort of the next steps.
Yeah, just fill out the interest form, and we'll contact you and let you know what we can do to help support you guys moving forward, and get this thing off the ground.
Absolutely. We're going to, have those links, and again, we'll ask you to provide, indicate interest in committees. You can pick more than one. You can provide us with a resume or bio information, and really just sort of, talk to us a little bit about why you're interested in the particular subcommittees you're interested in, and then we're going to gather all that information and probably send out some emails and host some quick sort of get-to-know-you calls with the folks interested in each of the sort of subcommittee functions, and as well as the overall participation in the ELC going forward. Recognizing that the holidays are coming up, we'll try to sort of organize some of those calls and outreach in the next few weeks. And then, of course, once we pass the new year, the next step will be working with those subcommittees and groups to talk about some plans and ideas and be able to present some of that at the February conference. Okay. I see another question here. about sort of the value proposition. What is the benefit to those who choose to volunteer? I would say, obviously, just like volunteering for any group and any organization like ResNet, it's about your interest and decision to commit to the growth of the industry. Again, obviously with this group in particular, that really is sort of the name of the game, and the purpose and intent behind the group is helping to expand and grow the industry for the future. So we certainly hope that any of you that are interested in volunteering your time, and we understand how valuable that is, given your work and your own personal life, that you will see some value in doing so. And then I see another question from David about people going to Zillow and Trulia to find housing rather than realtors in the mortgage industry, and how the mortgage industry helped to establish ResNet, and how will ResNet be able to partner with more progressive platforms. You know, I'll start on that, Matt, if you want to chime in. You know, we are working with, for instance, the folks at the Appraisal Institute to partner with them and launch a portal that appraisers will be able to access to view HERS information, so they can do comparables when conducting valuations of homes for sale. So I think, you know, we just had our board meeting a couple weeks ago, Matt, and we talked about some of these sort of other resources that are out there in the real estate space, and our opportunity to work with them.
Right, trying to get ResNet involved with the MLS and getting HERS information listed there. You know, you mentioned the appraisal. We're also trying to work with some banks to get interest rate reduction. There's all kinds of things. But I think it's great that you brought that up about, you know, how does ResNet get involved with some of these new organizations or groups like Zillow and things like that. I think that's kind of one of the things that this committee can work on is ways to get that out there. And
absolutely, those very questions, you know, about some of the information that, you know, probably is initially shared at a board level, as is understood to be, and then to then share with the membership, with the raters and providers and such. I envision that that's exactly what the folks on the engagement committee would do. They'd be able to help me, especially as a communications person, be able to effectively send out that message and help people understand what it is that the board is looking into and getting involved in, as well as perhaps even, you know, bringing up new topics and things that folks need to be aware of. So absolutely, it's a great question, and it really sort of speaks to what we would like this committee and the subcommittees to be doing to help get that word out so people know what's going on. Okay, I have about 2:35. We certainly have more time allotted should there be any other questions, but I don't see any others showing up. Again, if you have one, feel free to enter it into the chat function, and we'll be happy to address it. And as always, like with any of these webinars and events, should a question or idea pop into your mind afterward, again, you have our contact information there. Matt and I we're gonna send out these slides right after the webinar today, so you have that information handy. And as always, we welcome you to reach out to us and talk about what some of the ideas, the concerns you have for the committee and for, you know, the work that we could be doing.
I want to thank all you guys for giving us a half hour of your time on a Monday. Thanks for joining, and thanks for listening today.
Absolutely, absolutely. And we will be in touch very soon, again, with the slide deck and following up with folks as they indicate interest on the interest form. So again, I echo Matt's comments. Thank you so much for your interest in the Emerging Leadership Council, and we look forward to the opportunity to have work with you on some of these new initiatives that we're trying to get started. Again, thank you and have a great day.